The heavy doors of the Grand Council chamber opened with a slow, grinding sound. Commander Zixthara stepped inside, his metal boots clicking against the polished stone floor. The other council members looked up from their floating seats, their faces showing the same mix of pity and annoyance they always wore when they saw him. Zixthara had once been the most respected military commander in the Velta Republic. His green scales had once shined like precious gems, and his chest had been covered with medals of honor. Now those same scales were dull and scratched. Deep scars ran across his face and arms, reminders of battles fought in distant star systems. The medals were gone, taken away 3 cycles ago when the council decided he was no longer fit for duty. "Commander Zixthara," said Council Leader Mordain, his voice tired and cold. "We have told you many times that you are not welcome in these chambers anymore." Zixthara ignored the statement and walked to the center of the room. Around him, representatives from dozens of alien species sat in their floating chairs, looking down at him like he was some kind of sick animal. The Ethons with their pale blue skin and large eyes. The Korath with their thick shells and multiple arms. The Zephyrians with their feathered bodies and sharp beaks. All of them powerful. All of them sure they knew better than him. "You must listen to me," Zixthara said, his voice cracking slightly. "The humans are coming. They are not what you think they are." Several council members made sounds of disgust. Others simply looked away. Zixthara had been saying the same thing for 3 standard cycles now, and they were tired of hearing it. "Commander," said Ambassador Vextra of the Ethon Collective, her voice soft but firm. "You fought bravely in 17 campaigns. No one questioned your past service. But the trauma of war has damaged your mind. These humans you speak of are just another primitive species barely capable of space travel." Zixthara's claws dug into his palms. He had tried to explain so many times, but they never understood. They looked at the data and saw a young species that had just discovered faster-than-light travel. They saw a single planet with basic technology and simple weapons. They did not see what he had seen. "I was there," he said, his voice getting stronger. "I fought them. I watched my entire fleet get destroyed by beings who should not have been able to fight back. They are not like other species. They do not think like us." "Yes, we have heard this story before," said General Korth of the Korath Defense Force, his shell clicking as he moved. "You claim that a primitive species destroyed a Voltai battle fleet. But the official reports show that your fleet was lost to equipment failures and navigational errors in a dangerous star system." Zixthara felt his anger rising. The official reports were lies, written by politicians who could not accept the truth. They had covered up what really happened because it was too frightening to believe. "They changed the reports," he said. "They do not want the galaxy to know what humans are capable of. But I saw it with my own eyes. I watched them turn our own weapons against us. I watched them use tactics that no civilized being would ever consider." The council members exchanged looks. Some whispered to each other in their own languages. Zixthara could see the same thought in all their minds. Here was a broken soldier, his mind shattered by whatever had really happened in that distant star system. "Commander Zixthara," said Mordain, standing up from his floating chair, "you have served the galaxy with honor, but your service has ended. The medical board has declared you unfit for duty due to mental trauma. We understand that war can damage even the strongest minds." "My mind is not damaged," Zixthara shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I am the only one who sees clearly. These humans are not just another species to add to our empire. They are something different, something dangerous. They do not fight for territory or resources. They fight for survival, and they will do anything to win." Security guards began moving toward him. Zixthara recognized them, Veltai soldiers he had once commanded. Now they looked at him with the same pity as everyone else. "The humans are expanding," he continued, backing away from the approaching guards. Their ships are already exploring nearby systems. They are learning about us, studying our weaknesses. And when they are ready, they will strike. Enough, said Mordain. Remove him from the chamber. The guards grabbed Zixtar's arms, but he kept talking as they dragged him toward the door. You think your technology makes you safe, but they will find ways around it. You think your numbers give you power, but they will turn your own allies against you. I have seen what they can do. The great doors closed behind him with a final heavy sound. Zixtar stood in the hallway, breathing hard, his heart pounding in his chest. The guards released his arms but stayed close, ready to act if he tried to go back inside. Come on, Commander, said one of them gently. Let's get you home. Home. Zixtar almost laughed at the word. His home was a small apartment in the Veterans District, where old soldiers went to be forgotten. His days were spent staring at data screens, tracking human movements through the galaxy, watching as they slowly expanded their reach. Every report he filed was ignored. Every warning he gave was dismissed as they walked through the corridors of the council building. Zixtar passed windows that looked out over the capital city. Millions of beings lived here, going about their daily lives, completely unaware of the threat growing in the darkness between the stars. They trusted the council to keep them safe. They believed their advanced civilization made them untouchable, but Zixtar knew better. He had learned the hard way that advancement and civilization meant nothing when facing a species that refused to follow the rules. The humans did not care about honor or proper conduct in war. They cared only about winning, and they would do things that other species could not even imagine. Somewhere out there, human ships were moving through space. Human minds were planning and preparing. And someday soon, the galaxy would learn what Zixtar already knew, that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one everyone thinks is harmless. 3 days after being thrown out of the council chambers, Zixtar sat in his small apartment, staring at the holographic display floating above his desk. The images showed star charts, fleet movements, and intelligence reports, all focused on one small yellow star and the third planet orbiting it. Earth. His claws tapped against the metal surface of his desk as he remembered that first encounter. It had been 4 standard cycles ago, during what the humans now called the Soul Incident. At the time, it had seemed like such a simple mission. The Voltai Republic had discovered Earth through routine deep space scanning. Initial reports showed a young species that had just achieved basic spaceflight. They had primitive nuclear weapons and simple computers. Their largest ships could barely reach their own moon. To the Voltai military command, Earth looked like an easy target, a planet rich in resources with inhabitants too weak to resist. Zixtar had been given command of a standard occupation fleet. 3 battlecruisers, 12 destroyers, and 40 smaller ships. It was enough firepower to conquer most civilized worlds, and the humans did not even qualify as civilized yet. The plan was simple: demonstrate superior force, demand surrender, and begin mining operations. The memory of that first day still made his scales itch with unease. When the Voltai fleet had entered Earth's solar system, they had expected fear and confusion from the primitive inhabitants. Instead, the humans had done something unexpected. They've started talking, not just random communication attempts, but organized, intelligent responses. Within hours of the fleet's arrival, humans were broadcasting in perfect Voltai language, asking questions about their intentions, their technology, their culture. They wanted to know everything, and they learned frighteningly fast. This is Admiral Harrison of the United Earth Defense Force, the message had said, translated through the ship's computers. We welcome peaceful contact with your species. However, we must ask what your intentions are regarding our planet. Zixtar had found it amusing at the time. a primitive species thinking they could negotiate with the mighty Valtai Republic. He had responded with the standard demand for immediate surrender and had given them one standard day to comply. The humans' response had been polite but firm. They would not surrender their world to any foreign power. They offered to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchange, or mutual cooperation, but they would not simply give up their planet. Zixthara had been forced to demonstrate the fleet's power. He had ordered the destruction of one of Earth's communication satellites, a simple show of force that should have convinced the humans to see reason. Instead, it had triggered something that still gave him nightmares. The humans had not panicked. They had not begged for mercy. Instead, they had started fighting back with a creativity and determination that defied all military logic. Within 6 hours of the satellite's destruction, human ships were launching from Earth's surface. Not military vessels, but civilian craft retrofitted with weapons that no sane species would have thought to use. They had strapped nuclear bombs to cargo ships and sent them on collision courses with Valtai destroyers. They had filled passenger shuttles with explosives and used them as guided missiles. But that was just the beginning. The humans had somehow managed to hack into the Valtai communication system and were listening to every order, every plan, every tactical discussion. They knew where the ships were going before the crews did. Zixthara remembered the growing sense of unease among his officers as the battle progressed. This was not how primitive species were supposed to fight. They were supposed to fire a few desperate shots and then surrender when they realized how outmatched they were. But these humans just kept coming, wave after wave of them, using tactics that made no sense. They had sent suicide bombers disguised as surrender envoys. They had used their own wounded soldiers as bait for rescue operations that turned into ambushes. They had somehow figured out how to disrupt Valtai shields using modified civilian radio equipment. The worst part was how quickly they learned. Every tactic the Valtai used was analyzed and countered within hours. When the Valtai switched to different frequencies, the humans found them. When they changed their attack patterns, the humans adapted. It was like fighting an enemy that could read their minds. On the third day of what should have been a simple occupation, the humans had done something that still made Zixthara's blood run cold. They had somehow managed to board one of the Valtai battle cruisers. The ship's captain had sent a distress signal before going silent. Security footage showed what had happened next. A small group of humans had used capture Valtai equipment to cut their way into the ship's hull. Once inside, they had not tried to take prisoners or steal technology. They had simply planted nuclear explosives throughout the ship and detonated them. The entire crew of 3,000 Valtai soldiers had died in an instant. But the humans who had boarded the ship had died too. They had killed themselves just to destroy one enemy vessel. That was when Zixthara had realized they were not fighting a normal enemy. They were fighting a species that was willing to sacrifice everything to prevent defeat. The humans did not fight to win territory or capture resources. They fought to destroy anything that threatened their survival. The battle had continued for another week. Every day, the Valtai lost more ships to increasingly creative human attacks. The humans turned asteroids into weapons, used their own space stations as bombs, and somehow managed to steal and reverse engineer Valtai technology in the middle of combat. By the end of the second week, Zixthara's fleet was in full retreat. Of the 55 ships that had entered Earth's solar system, only 12 had escaped. The rest had been destroyed by a species that was supposedly thousands of years behind Valtai technology. The official reports had blamed equipment failure and navigational errors. The Valtai government could not admit that their mighty fleet had been defeated by primitives. So they had changed the story, classified the real events, and quietly decided to avoid human space in the future. But Zixthara could not forget what he had seen. He had watched humans do things that no civilized species would even consider. They had used tactics that violated every rule of proper warfare. And worst of all, they had enjoyed it. Now, sitting in his apartment, Zixthara looked at new intelligence reports about human expansion. In the 4 cycles since the Sol incident, humans had spread to 6 nearby star systems. They were building ships, establishing colonies, and most importantly, they were learning. Every piece of volatile technology they had captured during the battle was being studied and improved. Human ships were already faster and more heavily armed than they had been during the war. And according to intercepted communications, they were preparing for something big. Zixthara tried once more to compile his intelligence into a report that the council might actually read. But he knew it was hopeless. They had already decided he was insane, and nothing he said would change their minds. The galaxy was about to learn a very hard lesson about underestimating humans. Zixthara just hoped someone would survive to remember his warnings. The Grand Council chamber buzzed with excitement as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for a historic announcement. Ambassador Kethmos of the Ethon Collective stood at the central podium, her pale blue skin glowing softly under the chamber's lights. Today marked the beginning of humanity's official introduction to galactic civilization. My fellow council members, Kethmos began, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. After careful consideration, we have decided to initiate first contact protocols with the species known as humans. Our analysis shows they have achieved basic faster-than-light travel and appear ready for galactic integration. Excited murmurs filled the chamber. First contact with a new species was always a celebration. Most primitive worlds were grateful to join the galactic community, eager to trade their resources for advanced technology and protection. The humans would surely follow the same pattern. Council Leader Mordain nodded approvingly from his floating seat. The diplomatic corps has prepared the standard welcome package. We will offer the humans membership in the Galactic Trade Federation, access to our technology archives, and protection under galactic law. In exchange, they will provide their planet's resources and contribute to the common defense. The humans should feel honored, added General Korth of the Korth Defense Force. Few species are invited to join our community so early in their development. Usually, we wait until they have at least colonized their local star system. In his small apartment across the city, Zixthara watched the council session on his personal viewer, his claws digging deep grooves in his desk. He had tried to warn them, had filed report after report about human capabilities, but they continued to see Earth as just another primitive world waiting to be civilized. The irony was painful. While the council planned their peaceful first contact mission, Zixthara's intelligence sources were showing him something very different. Human ships had been detected in 7 different star systems, not the 3 the council believed they controlled. Worse, these ships were not exploration vessels. They were military scouts, heavily armed and equipped with technology that looked suspiciously advanced. Ambassador Kethmos continued her presentation, displaying holographic images of Earth and its solar system. The humans appear to be a diverse species with multiple governments and cultures. Our psychologists believe this makes them ideal candidates for peaceful integration. Divided species rarely pose any significant resistance to galactic authority. Zixthara wanted to laugh, but the sound that came out was more like a growl. Divided? The intelligence reports he had been tracking showed something completely different. Since the Sol incident 4 cycles ago, human governments had been cooperating in ways that had never happened before in their history. They were building a unified space force, sharing technology, and coordinating their expansion efforts. On screen, the council voted unanimously to approve the first contact mission. The ceremony would be broadcast across the galaxy, showing the universe once again how the wise and benevolent galactic civilization welcomed new members into their community. The chosen diplomat was Ambassador Kathmos herself, representing the peaceful Ethon Collective. She would travel to Earth aboard the diplomatic vessel Golden Dawn, accompanied by a small honor guard and bearing gifts of advanced technology. The mission was scheduled to depart in 3 standard days. Zixthar tried one last time to contact the Council. He sent an encrypted message directly to Mordane's personal communication system, marked with the highest priority codes. The message was simple and direct. The humans are not what they appear to be. This mission will end in disaster. Please reconsider. The response came back within minutes. Commander Zixthar, you are forbidden from contacting Council members regarding this matter. Any further attempts will result in your arrest for obstruction of diplomatic proceedings. Seek medical help. That night, Zixthar could not sleep. He paced around his apartment, his mind racing through every piece of intelligence he had gathered about human activities. The patterns were clear to anyone willing to see them. Humanity was preparing for something big, and the Council's first contact mission was going to trigger it. The Golden Dawn departed on schedule, carrying Ambassador Kathmos and her diplomatic team toward Earth. The launch was broadcast live across the galaxy, with news commentators discussing the exciting prospect of adding humanity to the galactic community. Children in schools watched special programs about first contact procedures. Scientists prepared welcome ceremonies. Zixthar watched it all with growing dread. The journey to Earth took 5 standard days at diplomatic cruise speed. The Golden Dawn was not a military vessel, but a symbol of peace. Its hull decorated with artistic representations of the various species that made up the galactic community. Its weapon systems were minimal, designed only for protection against space debris and minor hazards. As the ship approached Earth's solar system, Ambassador Kathmos sent the traditional first contact greeting on all frequencies. The message was broadcast in multiple languages, explaining the galactic community's peaceful intentions and inviting humanity to join their civilization. The human response came faster than expected. Within minutes of the first transmission, Earth was broadcasting back in perfect Ethon language, as well as the primary languages of a dozen other galactic species. This surprised the diplomatic team, but did not alarm them. Many species had basic translation capabilities by the time they achieved spaceflight. "Greetings, Ambassador Kathmos," the response began. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. We have been expecting your arrival." That phrase sent a chill through the diplomatic team. Expecting their arrival? How could a primitive species have known about a classified diplomatic mission? "We welcome the opportunity for cultural exchange," the human admiral continued. "However, we must inform you that Earth has already established its own interstellar policy. We do not seek membership in any galactic government or trade federation. We prefer to negotiate individual agreements with interested parties." Ambassador Kathmos was confused. In her 3 centuries of diplomatic service, she had never encountered a newly contacted species that already had established interstellar policies. Most were barely capable of spaceflight, let alone complex diplomatic positions. "Admiral Chun," she responded carefully. "Perhaps there is some misunderstanding. We represent the lawful galactic government. All civilized worlds are part of our community. We are here to offer you the benefits of galactic citizenship." The pause before the human response was longer this time. When it came, the tone had changed slightly. "Ambassador, we appreciate your offer, but Earth will remain independent. We have been monitoring galactic communications for some time and have decided that membership in your community would not serve our interests. However, we are willing to discuss mutual non-aggression pacts and limited trade agreements." The humans had been monitoring galactic communications. Ambassador Kathmos felt the first stirrings of unease. That should have been impossible for a species at their level of development. But if it was true, then they already knew about galactic military capabilities, trade routes, political structures. Admiral Chun, I think there may be some confusion about the nature of galactic law. All inhabited worlds fall under the authority of the Galactic Council. This is not optional. However, we are prepared to be very generous in our integration terms. This time, the human response came immediately. Ambassador, let me be very clear. Earth is not joining your galactic community. We govern ourselves, and we will continue to govern ourselves. If you wish to establish peaceful relations with humanity, we welcome that. If you wish to attempt to force us into submission, we are prepared for that as well. The threat was unmistakable, and it sent shockwaves through the diplomatic vessel. Ambassador Kethmos had never heard a newly contacted species speak with such confidence, such certainty. Either these humans were completely insane, or they knew something the galactic community did not. As the Golden Dawn entered Earth's solar system, her crew began detecting things that should not have been there. Defense platforms that looked far too advanced for a primitive species. Ships moving in formations that suggested military coordination. And energy readings that indicated weapons. Systems more powerful than anything in the diplomatic vessels. Database. Ambassador Kethmos realized with growing horror that perhaps Zixthara had not been insane after all. The news of the failed diplomatic mission reached the Galactic Council within hours of the Golden Dawn's return. Ambassador Kethmos stood before the assembled representatives, her normally calm demeanor visibly shaken. Her pale blue skin had taken on an unhealthy gray tint, and her large eyes darted nervously around the chamber. The humans refused our offer of galactic citizenship, she reported, her musical voice strained with stress. They claim to have been monitoring our communications and have already established their own interstellar policies. They demand to be treated as equals, not as a primitive species seeking protection. Council Leader Mordain leaned forward in his floating chair, his expression one of disbelief and growing anger. They demand? A single-planet species that has barely learned to leave their own solar system makes demands of the galactic community? That is not the worst part, Kethmos continued, her voice becoming quieter. Their technology appears to be far more advanced than our initial assessment suggested. They have defense platforms throughout their solar system and their ships. Their ships are using technology I do not recognize. General Korth's shell clicked loudly as he shifted in agitation. Impossible. Our intelligence clearly shows they are centuries behind us in development. They cannot have advanced so rapidly, unless they have been receiving assistance from an unknown source, suggested Ambassador Vextra of the Ethon Collective. Perhaps another species has been secretly aiding their development. But Kethmos shook her head. No. Admiral Chun made it clear that everything they showed us was human-designed and human-built. She seemed proud of their accomplishments. And she mentioned something else that disturbs me greatly. The chamber fell silent, waiting for her to continue. She said they have been monitoring our communications for some time. If that is true, they know about our military capabilities, our trade routes, our political structures. They may know more about us than we know about them. In the back rows of the chamber, the few representatives who remembered Zixthara began to feel the first stirrings of unease. The old veteran had been saying similar things for cycles, warning that humanity was not what it appeared to be. Most had dismissed his warnings as the ravings of a damaged mind. But now, this changes nothing, declared Mordain, his voice firm and commanding. The humans are clearly suffering from delusions of grandeur. Perhaps their rapid technological development has affected their judgment. We will send a peacekeeping force to remind them of their place in the cosmic order. A peacekeeping force? Kethmos looked alarmed. Council Leader, I strongly advise caution. These humans do not think like other species. Admiral Chun was not afraid of us. If anything, she seemed to be expecting conflict. All the more reason to act quickly, said General Korth. If we allow one primitive species to defy galactic authority, others might follow their example. We must demonstrate that the rule of law applies to everyone. The vote was swift and decisive. A peacekeeping fleet would be assembled, drawing ships from multiple member species. It would be large enough to overwhelm any possible resistance, while still maintaining the appearance of a police action rather than an invasion. The fleet would travel to Earth, demand immediate surrender, and establish a military occupation until humanity could be properly integrated into galactic society. What the Council did not know was that their communications were being intercepted by human intelligence agents who had infiltrated several galactic worlds during the past 4 cycles. Every word of their debate, every detail of their military planning, was being transmitted to Earth within hours of being spoken. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of the United Earth Defense Force, watching the intelligence reports flow in. Around her, military officers from every human nation worked together in a level of cooperation that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. The threat of alien invasion had accomplished what centuries of diplomacy could not. The Galactic Council has authorized a peacekeeping fleet, reported Intelligence Director Williams, reading from the latest intercept. Estimated strength: 47 capital ships, over 200 support vessels, with crews from at least 12 different species. Admiral Chun nodded calmly. This was exactly what they had been preparing for since the Sol incident. The aliens thought humanity was weak because they saw only one planet and assumed limited resources. They did not understand that humans had been expanding, preparing, and most importantly, learning. Signal all task forces, Chun commanded. Operation Prometheus is now active. Across human space, ships that had been hiding in asteroid fields and behind planetary rings began moving. These were not the primitive vessels the aliens expected, but warships built using technology reverse-engineered from the Voltai equipment captured during the first conflict. They were faster, more heavily armed, and crewed by beings who had spent years studying alien tactics. But the ships were only part of the plan. The real surprise was what humans had been doing on the galactic worlds themselves. For 4 years, human agents had been infiltrating alien societies. They did not come as obvious spies or military personnel. Instead, they came as traders, scholars, tourists, and refugees. They spoke local languages perfectly, understood cultural customs, and most importantly, they learned everything they could about alien technology and military capabilities. Some posed as members of primitive species seeking asylum after supposed natural disasters on their home worlds. Others claimed to be researchers studying galactic history and culture. A few even managed to get jobs working on military installations and government facilities. The aliens, confident in their superiority and convinced that primitive species posed no threat, rarely questioned newcomers who seemed appropriately grateful for galactic civilization. Now those agents were activated on the Korath homeworld. Explosions began erupting at key military installations. The attacks were precise and devastating, clearly planned by someone with intimate knowledge of Korath defenses. Within hours, the planet's primary shipyards and command centers were in flames. On Ethon Prime, the main communication hub that coordinated galactic fleet movements suddenly went dark. Investigation teams found that the complex computer systems had been infected with a virus that corrupted all military communications, while leaving civilian networks untouched. Similar attacks occurred across dozens of worlds simultaneously. Defense grids failed, supply depots exploded, command structures collapsed. The strikes were too coordinated to be random. too precise to be lucky. Someone had been planning this operation for a very long time. The most shocking discovery came when security forces on several worlds began capturing human saboteurs. Under interrogation, the prisoners revealed that they had been operating on alien worlds for years, gathering intelligence and preparing for exactly this scenario. When asked how so many humans had managed to infiltrate galactic society without being detected, the answers were disturbing. "You never thought to look for us," one prisoner explained to his Valtai interrogators. "You saw primitive aliens from backwater worlds, and you assumed we were harmless. You never imagined that some of those refugees and researchers might actually be human agents using genetic modification and cosmetic surgery to appear as members of other species." The Galactic Peacekeeping Fleet, already en route to Earth, found themselves facing a completely different situation than they had expected. Instead of intimidating a single primitive world, they were dealing with a coordinated attack on their entire civilization by an enemy that had been preparing for war while pretending to be defeated. Even worse, they were beginning to realize that the humans had not just been gathering intelligence. They had been learning, adapting, and improving on everything they discovered. The weapons being used against galactic targets were based on alien technology, but were somehow more effective than the originals. Admiral Chun watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy and allowed herself a small smile. The aliens thought they were dealing with a primitive species that had gotten lucky once. They were about to discover that humans did not just fight to win battles. They fought to make sure their enemies could never threaten them again. The real war was just beginning. The Galactic Peacekeeping Fleet never reached Earth. 3 days into their journey, while still in hyperspace, the fleet commanders received emergency communications from their home worlds. The messages were brief and desperate. Under attack, defense grids failing, requesting immediate assistance. By the time the fleet dropped out of hyperspace to assess the situation, the scale of the human assault had become clear. It was not just an attack. It was surgical destruction of the galactic civilization's ability to wage war. Admiral Torvak of the Veltai Republic stared at the tactical display in his command center, his scaled hands trembling slightly as he processed the incoming reports. In less than 72 standard hours, humanity had crippled the military infrastructure of a dozen species across dozens of star systems. Shipyards were burning, communication networks were down, and command structures had collapsed. "How is this possible?" he whispered to his tactical officer. "They are supposed to be a primitive species with a handful of crude starships." The answer came from an unexpected source. A transmission was received on all frequencies, broadcast simultaneously to every ship in the peacekeeping fleet. The image that appeared on their screens showed a human female in a simple military uniform, sitting at a desk in what appeared to be a standard command center. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force," she began, her voice calm and professional. "To the commanders of the Galactic Peacekeeping Fleet, I offer you a choice. You may return to your home worlds to assist with disaster relief, or you may continue toward Earth and join the wreckage already floating in our outer system." The transmission showed tactical displays of the Sol system. Where the aliens expected to find a lightly defended primitive world, they saw a fortress. Massive defense platforms surrounded Earth and its colonies, armed with weapons that looked suspiciously like improved versions of their own technology. Patrol fleets moved in precise formations, their ships clearly designed for war rather than exploration. "We have been preparing for this moment for 4 years, Chun continued. "Since your first peaceful contact attempt, we have been studying your technology, infiltrating your societies, and planning for the day when you would try to force us into submission." That day has arrived. Admiral Torvak felt his blood turn cold as the human's words sank in. The sole incident had not been a lucky victory by a desperate species. It had been a test, a chance for humanity to evaluate galactic military capabilities while demonstrating their own willingness to fight. "You made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity," Chun said, her tone becoming harder. "You assume that because we are young and few in number, we must be weak. You fail to understand that humans do not fight for conquest or glory. We fight for survival. And when our survival is threatened, we do not simply defend ourselves. We eliminate the threat." The tactical displays changed, showing the current status of galactic military forces. Ship construction facilities, offline. Command and control networks, destroyed. Supply lines, severed. In 3 days, humanity had reduced the mighty galactic civilization to a collection of isolated worlds with no ability to coordinate a response. "The choice before you is simple," Chum continued. "Accept human independence and withdraw from our space, or face the complete destruction of your civilization. We do not want your worlds or your resources. We simply want to be left alone. But if you force us to continue this war, we will not stop until every potential threat to humanity has been eliminated." Some fleet commanders wanted to fight. General Korth of the Korath Defense Force argued that they could not surrender to a single world species, regardless of their apparent capabilities. But as more reports arrived from the home worlds, it became clear that fighting was no longer an option. The humans had not just attacked military targets. They had somehow managed to infiltrate and disable the computer systems that controlled everything from life support on space stations to navigation computers on civilian vessels. Entire star systems were paralyzed. Their populations depended on emergency supplies and basic technology that still functioned. Admiral Torvek made the decision that would define the rest of galactic history. He ordered the peacekeeping fleet to return home. The journey back was silent and grim. Ship after ship dropped out of formation as they reached their respective home systems, returning to worlds that would never be the same. The age of galactic unity was over, shattered by a species that most had never heard of just days before. On Earth, Admiral Chun watched the alien fleet withdraw and felt no satisfaction. This had not been a victory in any traditional sense. It had been a necessity, a demonstration that humanity would go to any length to preserve its independence. The cost had been enormous, requiring years of preparation and the sacrifice of agents who might never see their home world again. But it had worked. The galaxy now understood that humanity was not just another primitive species to be cataloged and controlled. They were something different, something dangerous. In the months that followed, the new reality of the galaxy took shape. The Galactic Council officially dissolved, unable to maintain authority over member worlds that could no longer communicate reliably with each other. Some species attempted to rebuild their military forces, but found that humans had been very thorough in their destruction. Key technologies had been corrupted or destroyed, and the knowledge needed to recreate them was often lost. Other species chose a different path. They sent diplomatic envoys to Earth, seeking accommodation with the new galactic power. These negotiations were careful and respectful, nothing like the arrogant demands that had characterized galactic diplomacy in the past. Humanity's terms were surprisingly simple. They wanted mutual non-aggression pacts, limited trade agreements, and most importantly, recognition of human territory as absolutely off-limits to alien interference. In exchange, they offered to share certain technologies and to refrain from further attacks on species that honored the agreements. Some found these terms reasonable. Others retreated to distant star systems, hoping to rebuild their civilizations far from human space. A few attempted to organize resistance movements, but these efforts consistently failed when their leaders mysteriously disappeared or their facilities suffered convenient accidents. The galaxy learned that Humanity had not abandoned their intelligence networks after the war. Human agents continued to operate throughout known space, watching for any sign of renewed threats to human security. The message was clear. The war might be over, but human vigilance was eternal. Zixthara found himself in an ironic position. The broken veteran who had been dismissed as insane was suddenly the galaxy's most valuable expert on human behavior. Governments that had once ignored his warnings now begged for his insights into human psychology and tactics. He established himself as an intermediary between humanity and the remnants of galactic civilization. His knowledge of both human capabilities and alien politics made him uniquely qualified to help species navigate the new reality. It was dangerous work. Many aliens blamed him for not preventing the catastrophe, while humans viewed him with suspicion because of his past as an enemy commander. But Zixthara had found his purpose again. In his small office on a neutral station at the edge of human space, he helped forge the agreements that would define galactic politics for generations to come. Each successful negotiation meant fewer species would choose the path of resistance, and fewer worlds would face the terrible efficiency of human warfare. Years passed, and the galaxy adapted to its new circumstances. Trade routes were re-established along new patterns. Diplomatic protocols developed around human preferences. Technologies advanced in different directions, influenced by human innovations that often seemed to violate traditional scientific assumptions. The children who grew up in this new galaxy knew the stories of the old galactic civilization, but they seemed like ancient history. The reality they understood was simpler. Humanity controlled their own destiny and would destroy anything that threatened that control. Other species could cooperate, compete, or hide, but they could not rule. And in the depths of space, human ships continued their patient patrols, watching over a galaxy that had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is not the one that hunts for food, but the one that fights to ensure it will never be prey again.